Love them or loathe them, the royal family are never far from the news, particularly this week with the imminent publication of yet another book that claims to reveal all. But whether the House of Windsor is creating significant moments in the history of our nation, or just endless gossip and fascination around the world, for the Times, one man has been there to cover it all.
It's a funny job being a royal correspondent because it's a job that no one ever wants. It's not like being political editor or something like that, where, there's a deputy out there who wants your job and there's a number 3 who wants his job.
For 15 years, Valentine Low has reported on royal weddings and royal funerals. He's been on royal visits across the country and beyond, to Australia, Bhutan, the Galapagos, India, Kenya. But now, he's retiring.
You are there to be a proper reporter. You're there to report the proper stories. You're not there to do their PR for them or to write what goes down well with them. I mean, it's nice if you have friendly relations, of course it is, but you're not there to be their friend.
As Valentine leaves the Times, he takes us behind the scenes of what it's really like reporting on Britain's most famous family. You're listening to Stories of Our Times from The Times and The Sunday Times. I'm Manveen Rana. Today, Confessions of a Royal Writer.
I'm Valentine Low. I write about the royal family for The Times.
Does it feel weird saying royal correspondent?
I'm always phobic about doing that because, very strictly speaking, I'm not the royal correspondent. My job title, pompously and poetically, is writer. And I've always loved that. So I refuse to call myself royal correspondent, even though I effectively am, because I love the idea that I'm the Times' writer.
Well, I'm sure you'll still be a writer at the end of the week, but you won't be the Times' writer on all things royal.
No.
How does that feel?
It feels very strange because I've loved the Times. It's been such fun and such a privilege to work here. It's the world's greatest newspaper. And it has been, as they say, quite a journey covering the royals. Because when I started, they were really quite dull. I mean, it was one of those fallow periods. We'd got over all the Diana years and there wasn't an awful lot going on. The most exciting thing was William getting engaged to Kate, which, in terms of excitement...
Big moment.
It's a big moment, but it's also quite a bland moment. It's sort of, the trajectory of history moving on. Look, nice young heir to the throne finds nice young girl. It's not a shock and it's not a surprise.
And what's it like when you're suddenly assigned to the royal beat?
The perception of people from the outside is that, you have to be terribly posh to do it. You have to know what fork to hold. You have to be able to sort of get on with the royals. You have to be interested and love them. And actually, none of that's true. The royal media pack is full of people there are some people who are quite keen on the royal family. Broadly, it goes from neutrality to utter contempt. And the idea that somehow we're socially acceptable to the royal family is also a non-starter. We're the scum of the scum, really. They'd rather we disappeared. But we are a necessary evil as far as they're concerned. So, yeah, they put up with us and occasionally pretend to like us, but not really.
Did they ever pretend to like you?
Well, Camilla was always the friendliest one because she's normal. I mean, she hasn't been brought up in this bubble. And I remember taking a very sort of conscious decision when I was first doing this and was first coming across Camilla. I took a conscious decision just to treat her as if she was a friend of my mother-in-law's. So my mother-in-law lives in Wiltshire, so as we're not that far from where Camilla's home is. And I just thought, well, just pretend she's one of my mother-in-law's friends. And so you treat her with some friendliness, but not over familiarity. And it kind of works splendidly. And but I do remember once when Downton Abbey was a big thing. And when I wasn't writing about royals, I wrote other things. I wrote a piece about Downton Abbey. There'd been a bit of a shocking episode. Some character had died, and I made a reference to this. And I did say in my story, spoiler alert, just in case you haven't seen the episode yet. Anyway, a few weeks passed, and I was on tour with Charles and Camilla in Australia, and I was doing one of the first jobs, I think it was in Queensland. And Camilla came into the room where we were, and she sort of made a slight diversion to come over to talk to me. And I said, oh, look, how nice Camilla's going to say hello, how lovely.
She likes you.
And she came over to me and said, Valentine, you totally ruined my Downton.
In a way, I suppose you get to see the royals, not just the clips that are on TV. You see them the rest of the time, the downtime. You sort of see them up close when they're doing these events. And that's how you get those wonderful asides. What was that like? I mean, what are they like as characters?
What you did is you'd get used to, and you were quite good at discerning their varying moods. So Harry could be quite grumpy, but he also could be very keen and funny and up for it. I always remember when we were in Jamaica with Harry, and he was due to sort of do something with Usain Bolt, and they staged a running race, and then Harry basically distracted him and ran to the finish line. It was a fantastic moment.
England's Prince Harry just couldn't wait. When he had a chance to race the Olympic gold medal sprinter Usain Bolt in Jamaica today, and the prince wasn't above a little trickery to get a head start. Bolt has asked for a rematch during this summer's London Olympics.
I always remember with the Queen, the late Queen Elizabeth, just by the subtlest of signs you could know if she was in one of her Miss Piggy moods or whether she was...
Miss Piggy moods? Tell us about those.
Well, you just had her Miss Piggy face on and she would go through the motions, but, she obviously was not going to do anything over and above because of what she'd been doing for decades. You can't really continue to be interested all the time when you've been doing it for so long.
No.
But other times, particularly if there was a horse around, and if she had a carrot on her or a mint or whatever, and she could feed the horse, then she was happy as Larry. But you never know how they're going to take to you.
I mean, you do have to sort of follow them off to far-flung places, which can't always be easy. And some of those places, it can be quite controversial. People suddenly start talking about republicanism more recently. Tell us about New Zealand in particular.
New Zealand, yes. So we arrived in New Zealand and this TV crew was following us around, surreptitiously filming us, which was quite annoying, quite cheeky.
Not filming the royals, but filming you.
Yeah, they'd been filming the royals too, but they were also filming us, possibly even eavesdropping our conversations. And I did have a full and frank exchange of views with them, and I did explain to them this was not what they were going to carry on doing. It got a little testy. Anyways, that all passed off fine, thought no more of it. Then the next morning, they asked me if I'd given them an interview. It was a perfectly straightforward interview about the royals, the press, whatever. And at the end of it, the TV reporter said, is there anything else you'd like to say? And I just thought to myself, this is a strange way of conducting interviews. You're meant to think of the questions. But I said, I guess out of devilry as much as anything, I said, well, I do find it strange that New Zealand continues to have a head of state from the other side of the world. And her eyes popped out on stalks. I think basically she was a hurried signal to the cameraman to carry on filming. And we proceeded to talk about that for about 5 minutes. And, I was perfectly fine with it. And she did say, do you think you should have a republic in the UK? And I said, no, not typically. I'm fine with the royal family being in the UK, but I just can't understand why you have this person from the other side of the world. Anyway,
I assume that's not what they were expecting to hear.
It certainly was not what they were expecting. The interesting thing was a lot of people assumed that the palace would be furious.
I was going to say, does that get you in trouble? Are you in the doghouse?
They couldn't care less, really. I think they regard us as beyond hope, beyond saving. As long as we don't write any lies or think there's outrageous untruth, they just let us get on with it. So the fact that I think New Zealand shouldn't necessarily have the royals as the head of state, they took that on the chin.
Wow. And is that the palace that takes it on the chin, or do the royals themselves take it on the chin? I mean, how much interaction do you have with them, and do they all get to know you?
You have not an awful lot of interaction, but some. I mean, some of them know you and will occasionally address you by name, but sometimes you're not quite on their radar. The Queen and Prince Philip went to Australia. That must have been in the autumn of 2011, I think. We had a strong suspicion it was going to be her last tour of Australia, which indeed it turned out to be. And so you followed them around Australia for sort of whatever it was, 10 days or something a week. And then a small number of weeks later, there was a reception at Buckingham Palace. Reception being posh, palace speak for a drinks party. They can't call it a drinks party, they have to call it a reception. And this was, for the media, in anticipation of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. And there was one of those receiving lines where you all queue up and you shake hands with the Queen and you shake hands with Prince Philip. So I joined my place in the queue and got to the front. Some stentorian-voiced flunky says, Mr. Valentine Low of the Times. You go forward and you say, how do you do, ma'am? And she says, how do you do? And really nothing much more than that. And then you go on to Philip, and another flunky says, Mr. Valentine Low of the Times. And at this point, Philip perked up. He said, the Times. What do you do for them? I thought, what? I've just been following you around Oz for the last 2 weeks. You didn't notice me ever?
Or like the decade before that.
What I wanted to say was I follow you around, you old fool, but I didn't put it in quite those terms.
He probably would have appreciated that.
Maybe.
In the role of royal correspondent, you have to be there for every big moment in life, and sometimes that can be extraordinarily exciting, and sometimes it can be a little bit dull, I suppose. I mean, I'm thinking in particular of the very start of life. You're there for the long days of excruciating births.
Yeah, the babies. I mean,
tell me about that.
The ritual of royal women having babies. I mean, I had a lot of sympathy when Meghan refused to participate in the great Lindo wing, which is the kind of private maternity wing of the St Mary's Hospital in Paddington. What that involves is a huge pack. It's like, 150 people, something like that, reporters, TV crews, photographers, and all the kind of royal fans, should we call them. It's a circus, and, they give birth and we wait for some palace functionary to come out and inform us, and write it all up, and then you hang around a bit more, and then eventually they will come out, and you have this excruciating thing of the mother sort of caked in makeup. She's just given birth. The last thing she wants to do is see anyone, let alone 150 members of the media. It's cruel and unusual punishment. But before all that happens, there's the waiting. You wait outside the hospital, and if you're a TV person, you have to stay there all the time because you never know what's going to happen. If
you do have these international crews. You have a helicopter overhead.
Yeah, all these kind of big anchors from ABC and CBS and NBC and all that lot. They're all there, looking incredibly coiffed and well-groomed, whatever ghastly hour it is. But it's a long wait, and even for a print reporter such as myself, you were there, you'd pop in most days, and it was a long, tedious wait.
Well, plenty more to come from here, of course. None of it news, because that'll come from Buckingham Palace. But that won't stop us. We'll see you later. Rachel.
Simon, glad to hear it. Thanks very much indeed, Simon McCoy there for us.
And I remember when Kate was pregnant with George, it just went on forever and ever, and you go stir crazy. There's no other serious work you can do, because it's the only story in town, and it's happened. And I got driven to such distraction that I ended up writing a kind of ditty about it. And, some of your...
we have to hear this.
Some of your older viewers might remember the famous footage of Bob Dylan performing Subterranean Homesick Blues, I think behind the back of the Savoy Hotel. And he had these kind of giant cue cards with the lyrics. Anyway, I kind of wrote this kind of ditty. The Sun, I think it was the Sun. The Sun had set up a baby cam. So it was a camera focused on the front door of the Lindo wing. And I wrote this ditty, and I call it the Baby Cam Blues. Basically all about how bored I was waiting. And I think it...
Come on, we need a rendition.
I just remember little bits of it. There was one bit that said, woke up this morning, looked out for some news. There wasn't any. I've got the Baby Cam Blues. And I think the definitive couplet, she's late, I hate the great Kate Wait. It's poetry. I don't know why it didn't get a Pulitzer. I had this huge artist sketch pads, and I got the art department of the Times to write out in there, find us writing the words so it could be seen on a TV camera. So I could have performed it as well, like that, silently, for the baby cam. Then I had all these networks coming up to me because there was nothing else going on, nothing happening, nothing doing.
And they had a lot of time to fill.
So I made international news. It was absolutely astonishing. In my copy, I did describe it as This effort is a primeval cry of despair, expressing the existential angst of the media professional deprived of his very reason for being. Or, to put it another way, there wasn't much going on. But anyway, it passed a day, Manveen. It passed a day.
There are so many reasons we're going to miss you. That's one of them. It hasn't always been just the jolly stories, though. I mean, you did have all the drama, the high drama of Harry and Meghan and Megxit.
Oh, God, yeah,
What
Megxit.
was that like to report on?
That was kind of crazy. We knew things were up because the Sun had their famous front page saying they're off, but nothing had been confirmed. We didn't know what was going on. And the next day, I'd done my work for the day, and I was on the tube, and I was going home, and I just happened to be reading the paper on my iPad, and on the tube, after about 2 stops, this thing pops up. I could see a message pop up. I couldn't read the whole of it, but it just said, "Statement by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex." And I thought, oh my God. And I literally ran off the tube at the next stopping as Waterloo, ran across to the other platform, jumped onto the next train going back to the office and arrived rather breathlessly. And I then didn't stop working for a week. It was
Wow.
crazy times. I think I had the front page 5 days in a row. It was sort of, yeah.
It was an
bewildering.
extraordinary time.
Yeah.
I mean, when that statement popped up, did you have a hint it was coming? Did you think they're off?
Well, look, we obviously knew they may well be off. They were probably off. Funnily enough, some months earlier, the royal correspondents had been having lunch. And for a game, we wrote down what we thought was going to happen to Harry and Meghan. We thought, something's going to happen. We didn't know what the future held at all.
I love the games at one of these royal correspondent lunches.
And I claimed the prize for this. I wrote that they were going to go off to Canada and Harry was going to become the Duke of Vancouver. Which,
Not far off.
Not far off.
You also reported on some of the bullying allegations around them. Was that quite difficult? I mean, when you're reporting on the royal family so closely all the time and suddenly you're reporting on things that they really probably don't love being out there, is there a sense, I mean, what happens the next time you see Prince Harry?
That really is the last thing on your mind.
Yeah.
You are there to be a proper reporter. You're there to report
Yeah.
the proper stories. You're not there to do their PR for them or to write what goes down well with them. Your only concern is to make sure it's right and to make sure you don't get sued. And of course, Meghan at the time was suing the Mail on Sunday about a case which she eventually won, about invasion of privacy and breach of copyright. So when I started working on that story, I worked hard with my news desk and also crucially with the newspaper's lawyer to make sure we got it right. And we spent a long time getting it right. And in fact, there was one point when I thought the story was probably ready to go. And the then editor, John Witherow, at the last moment said, no, we're going to hold off a bit. And I was furious at the time. And my main source for the story was furious and upset. They were having a very difficult time because it was very difficult being involved with this as a source. But with hindsight, John Witherow is completely correct. We waited about 3 or 4 more days and I did some more firming up of the story and it was a good thing. We wanted to make it copper bottom, that story, and we did. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating in the sense that we were never sued.
Yeah.
Angry lawyer letters before publication, lengthy angry lawyer letters before publication, silence afterwards.
That's when you know you've got it right.
Yeah.
Was it difficult, though? I mean, when did you have to see Harry and Meghan again? And was there any sort of sense of, we read your story and we didn't much like it?
In a sense, I don't really care what they think. I'm not there for them to be my friend.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice if you have friendly relations. Of course it is. It's always nice if you have friendly relations in your role, but you're not there to be their friend.
And for a royal correspondent, I mean, that was a moment of real high drama, a lot going on that you don't really expect normally.
Yeah.
The other moment you must be dreading for years is the big deaths, and they all happened on your watch. Yeah. What was that like?
Well, the royal family, they do have, I mean, I'm absolutely convinced this is deliberate. They do have a habit of dying at the most inconvenient moment possible.
Is it usually when you're about to go on holiday?
When Diana died, I was on a press freebie. I was working for the Evening Standard then, and I was on a press freebie in the Mediterranean off the coast of Turkey. And I think it took me about 24 hours to get back. It was not easy.
For the biggest story.
And we had an inkling that something had happened, but it was just a garbled message that someone on the boat had got. We were out of phone signal, so we couldn't ring anyone to establish. We were off the coast of Turkey. We could get Greek radio. So we could have listened to Greek radio. Of course, none of us spoke a word of Greek. We did hear the words Diana, tragedia, and catastrophe. So I kind of figured it was probably true.
That's when you've got to get off the boat.
That's when you have to get off the boat, yeah. But when Prince Philip died, I was on a day off, of course, because you're always on a day off. And I have an allotment, and my wife and I had been collecting bark chips for the allotment. And I got this phone call from a source of mine saying, basically informing me that Philip was dead. And literally, I just told my wife, drive home now. But the good thing there was that I did have the tip in advance. So I was able to tell the office, the news desk, about 25 minutes before the official announcement that announcement was coming, and I earned the undying gratitude of the news desk. Just not write anything, not publish anything, but just to get everything ready for when it does come made a huge difference. And then when the Queen died, I was on a week off, and I'd written a book recently called Courtiers, and I was recording the audiobook. So I'd been, for the previous 3 days, in a recording studio in Soho in some basement. And that lunchtime, I had happened to surface and check my emails for some reason. And there was an email saying that the Queen's doctors were concerned for her health. I thought, oh my goodness. Okay. But I hadn't quite finished doing the recording. And so I had to ring into the office, say, okay, look, well, she's still alive. I will be with you shortly. But there's something I just have to finish first. And I'm not sure the news desk was terribly happy about that, but I assured them I'd be quick. So I had 2 more chapters to read, and literally I just raced through those chapters. I did blah, 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 the end. Will that do? Thanks. Okay, I'm off now. But then just jumped into a taxi and went to go and work, and then didn't stop working for the next 10 days. It was an extraordinary period. But also, I've been dreading it. I really had been dreading it because I thought it was going to be awful. But it was exhausting work, but also an amazing moment to be part of, incredibly proud to have sort of played my part in it. And the front page I wrote that day, funny enough, it was a front page that I'd started writing 3 years earlier. So I had the bones of it. Then, of course, you tweak it and update it, you make it relevant, and you make it correct, and you make it fresh. Seeing that you wrote the story of the Queen's death, and it's on the front page of the Times, this historic event, it's sort of, they can't take that away from you.
What will you miss the most about being the royal correspondent at the Times?
It's a funny job being a royal correspondent because it's a job that no one ever wants. No one else in the office is, snapping your heels trying to get the job. It's not like being political editor or something like that, where there's a deputy out there who wants your job and there's a number 3 who wants his job. In many ways, people think it's a faintly ridiculous job. But also, there are times when you are the centre of attention. Whether it's Prince Andrew, whether it's Brexit, whether it's the death of the Queen, suddenly you are it. You are the absolute focus of the newspaper, and you're the focus of what is going on. And it's hard work and it's grueling. I mean, I was completely wrung out by the end of the sort of 10 days of the Queen's death. But it's amazing to be part of.
And in one way or another, those tend to be the big moments in our history, in our nation's story too.
Yeah.
And you're right there at the heart of writing them.
First draft of history and all that.
We're all going to miss you a hell of a lot. Do the royals know you're leaving? I mean, do you get some sort of a leaving do with them? Do they give you a gold watch for your service? What happens?
No, they don't. But I was recently on the state visit to Kenya, and at the end of it, Charles and Camilla came to the back of the plane to say hello to all of us, which they do, and they've been well briefed that it was both my last tour and also Nick Witchell of the BBC's last tour. So, it was nice. I had a nice little chat with them about it, and they sort of said, oh, what are you going to do? So on and so forth. For a brief moment, they acknowledged my existence, and that was nice.
Were they quite jealous of the idea of being able to retire?
Yeah, I think Camilla was particularly jealous of the fact that We could retire and she can't.
You've been listening to Stories of Our Times, a podcast brought to you thanks to the subscribers of The Times and The Sunday Times, with me, Manveen Rana, and my guest, departing writer for The Times, Valentine Low. The producer today was Edward Drummond. The executive producers were Kate Ford and Fiona Leach, and sound design was by Hannah Farrell. If you enjoyed this episode, please do leave us a review. It'll help others to find it. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow.